All right, hey, we're back. Patrick just went on a long tangent about a new version of how the solar system was evolved, and both Trevor and I are, well, we're not that smart. So
neither am I. So explaining that really came like it was really poorly done.
Do you remember? There was a show, and I don't know if this was a good show, to be honest. It was just the name, Third Rock from the Sun. Do you remember the show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I remember being I think it was a younger teenager, when all of a sudden that name clicked to me, like we're literally floating in the atmosphere. We're like the third rock from, and obviously whatever. Like it was just one of those little moments where it was like, it's kind of crazy because I don't like, it's such a small little view you get when you live here. I know there's space and stuff, but sometimes you forget it's so small, and then you kind of zoom out a little bit and you're like, man, like there's a massive amount of unknown in the universe.
Huge.
And in everything.
It's unreal.
Like,
it just kind of makes you go, what in the world? And then when we actually we understand,
right.
I'm kind of left like, I don't even get my kids. I don't get my wife. Like,
I got my kids. I don't get myself.
Well, yeah.
Like if you get yourself, you already want to.
No, like I didn't want to go there right away.
Not like it, but you think of, I think it's Isaiah 55 where God's like you know nothing. Like, were you there when the mountains were formed? Like, were you there? Like, and so it's just really interesting to me. Sometimes you get that little perspective shock where, not that I think our intelligence is awesome. I think, trying things, but every now and again be a reminder, we know nothing.
Really?
We know so little.
So little.
All right. Hey, well, welcome. For those of you guys watching, if you're new to this one we might actually share a little bit. But our goal with this is literally just to give some additional conversation. Sometimes it'll be on Sunday morning stuff. Sometimes it'll be on stuff that we just feel like we need a space to talk. And if anybody has any use to listen, that's good.
Yeah.
So today what we want to do is, I've been on a series called Can You Hear Me Now? And we're talking about the challenges we have as conversations. And one of the things that came up after yesterday that I don't think I'm going to be able to fit into my 5-parter, but I thought was a really, really good question. And there's context to it, and it's a personal question, so I won't give any of the context. We'll just speak loosely. What do you do when you're in a space where a relationship that you're in is one-sided and you can never talk? And so you're implementing all of the hearing, but that person never gives you space. So that's one thing I want to talk about. And then the second one is the impact of how we live day to day when it comes to these conversations. So those are 2 places we're going. And one of my favorites, I wish if we had higher technology, I wish whenever I gave this is what we're talking about, I wish we could zoom in on Patrick's face and just watch his little, you can see the hamsters just spinning away. And he's like,
They're teddy bear hamsters because they're cuter.
He knows,
so you know.
He knows at some point I'm going to pause and look at him, and he's supposed to talk. So, let's talk about the one about the impact of our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health on these conversations.
Well, I mean, to be fair to you, you actually gave me a 15-minute lead in
on that one. I did.
About a 15-minute lead in. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I have additional questions that I want to pose or ask or think about. If somebody doesn't have the space or the capacity, then what is it about our lives that we actually don't have that? Why are we left in a place where important connections there's no room left for them in our busyness of our day?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can I come back to that? Can I just say one thing real quick?
He's cut me off because he wants to come at this from a different point. But
okay, so I think before we get too far I think it's crucial to remind ourselves that we literally do not all have the same capacities.
True.
And so I think before we get into this, and I know where you're going with it, and I really like it, I think it's important to go, just because I have the capacity to have these types of conversations and be able to do some of this stuff does not mean somebody else does.
True.
And there is a piece where it's good and bad, but I think there's also, again, it goes back to that self-awareness piece. You have to be aware of what you can handle and what you can't. So for instance, I think the first example that comes to mind is fire hall. When you would get on scene to something, you would know whether you were created for this or not. So I remember we went to a two vehicle head on. We extricated. We had 2 air ambulances come to this one. And to me, I was like, I'm sad that this happened, but I love this. Like, I get to use my skills. I get to help some people. Like, I didn't cause the accident. I'm not, but if they're going to be in an accident, I want to be here. And one of our other guys quit after that call. Right. And so it's not a good or a bad. I don't know why I enjoyed that. I have no clue. But I think sometimes there's a risk where we look at other people and we go, well, you should have the capacity, and maybe they just don't. Maybe God did not wire them for some of this stuff the way he wired others. Like even in my family, and then we'll get back to your point. My dad loves arguments. So if we sit there and we go, well, let's talk Trump, let's talk politics, and we can enjoy it. And I don't even remember if we've ever gotten to a place where we were mad at each other. Like we just enjoy it. It's fun. And he loves getting us going. He loves kind of, poking and prodding. My mom will leave the room. She hates those conversations. She can't handle the tension. And it's not good or bad. So I think there is a piece where, before we dive too far into this, because I think sometimes when people don't have that capacity, they can feel really guilty, like, I should be better. Well, no, maybe that's just not you. And again, there's lots to this. There's some conversations you have to have regardless. Whether you want to or not as a parent, you have to talk to your child. If you want to save your marriage, you have to talk to your spouse. But just as a general rule of thumb, figuring out where you do well and being aware of that, I think is really good. Go.
I think that point that you're making applies to a lot of conversations that don't go exactly as one person might think they should. So if I enter in a conversation with my spouse, and I come at the conversation from a very male, factual,
right. Yep.
This is the outcome, and she's coming at it from how the person felt, and I think understanding that there are conversational limitations. Like, I don't know if I will ever be able to fully understand emotionally like my wife would. Like I don't think my brain like is wired that way. I can understand emotional, but I don't know if it'll be like that.
Right.
And I don't know if the conversation that she has with other females, she could ever derive the same kind of feeling of connectivity from me.
Right.
And I think that's an important point of when we're having conversations to understand,
right,
is that she might get some of that connectivity, or it might be the same, but it might only be like 5 minutes.
Right.
Because I don't have the capacity to just dwell there.
Right.
Like that's not the way I'm wired. That's not the way. And she's not necessarily wired for, let's just cut to the fact and seemingly push aside all consideration for how my child feels or this moment feels, and get straight to the outcome.
Yeah.
And that almost seems like I'm being dismissive of very important things for her, when really I'm just coming about the conversation from how I'm wired.
Right.
So I think kind of making sure that we have that understanding both of capacities of the individual that we're talking to, but also understanding that there are differences in how people have conversations. And I think some of those are limiting factors, and not that it's a negative, but I think we kind of have to step back a little bit and go, is the person hearing me? Yes. Okay. Was it everything I thought it should be? Does it have to be? Or is it enough that you were heard, you were understood, and that there was a connection with what the conversation was supposed to be about? Like it might have not been the bells and whistles and fireworks display that somebody wanted it to be, but it might have had all the points of a conversation that were necessary to be able to strengthen, unite, continue the conversation further. Like I think some of that I think is an important consideration as well. Like,
and people I don't think they realize how much that actually matters, because when I was in the factory way back in the day, most affairs did not start from a physical attraction. They started from being able to connect with somebody in a conversation in a way that you all of a sudden built this connection. So you'd be sitting in the car, and like factories are just kind of breeding grounds for this because you're bored, and so you talk. And so you end up having some of this connection. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this person is really easy to talk to. And really easy to talk to starts getting into, this is fun. And then fun gets into, and so it's interesting when we talk about the stuff, like, I don't think we can be really dismissive of it, of the fact that we crave this. I don't care. Anybody who says, well, I don't need to talk. No, you do. You want that connected. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge of being married is you marry somebody that will, for some of these areas, be awesome for you and for others not. Mm-hmm. Right? Like when I look at our marriage, like Jose and I love doing most of the things that our kids do. We love doing that together. We love travel. There's so many things, but there are things that we're not, the same. And there's things that I'm like, man, I wish she was more like this. And I wish he was more like that. I'm sure she has that list. But so if you're not careful and you go, okay, well, oh man, this other girl, like, she's really easy to talk to. I really enjoy this conversation. I'm getting something out of it. And I think I always had this illusion when I was, younger in ministry, like it always just starts with, hey, let's go out and get laid. Like it doesn't start there. Usually it's an emotional thing. And then goes from there. I mean, now with some of the apps and some of the craziness that's out there, some of it's different, but usually it's a heart thing. And so this idea of being able to talk in marriage, this idea of being able to feel connected, I think is important. But also what you were saying, like, you're not going to get everything from your spouse. And if you're not careful, you're going to go out searching for it elsewhere. And when you get that need met, there is a risk that you're going to make a decision you deeply regret. And so when we're having these, I think that's an awareness too of going, okay, it's okay that I feel like me and Jose can't talk about everything, but me going to another female, is that really going to end well? Probably not.
No, I think the same kind of expectations, like I feel like as a person, I can put the same kind of expectations in many areas of life, not just conversations. Like, sure. I can do the same thing with a job. I can do the same thing with a vehicle. I can do the same thing with a coach on a team, and I can do the same thing with. I have an expectation of what all the things that need to be ticked, all the boxes that need to be ticked, for me to say, well, I think that was what a coach should be, or that's my job should be like that. When you could literally have, 90% of what you think your job should be, and there's 10% that you don't like, and you're like, well, I'm going to go look for another work.
Yep.
I don't even know if it's possible for you to find the other 10. Like, right. I just, with humanity and brokenness and just the difficulty of trying to find something that's perfect, you're going to come to some place where there are things that you just cannot find. Right. Which is, I think, why the undercurrent of, marriage is a covenant commitment, right, that says, for better, for worse. You're openly admitting that you understand that the person that you're with and the person that you are has some for worse qualities. Right. Has some things that aren't for better. Not
has, and will continue to have.
They will continue to have, because there are just parts of them that will never really become what you think they should become, right, because yep, that's the way they were made. And that's not an excuse for somebody to continue in bad behavior or, sure, things. I'm yep, just saying there are limiting factors. Yep. Like, I will never have, my brain is not a math brain. There was a point where I could do math, and then it just seemed like I crossed over this void where I'm just not really that good at certain, equations. I get lost.
Brings me joy, because you used to do banking, and so I feel like switching out of that is probably positive.
Yes, positive. It's very positive. No, but like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
There's something that disconnects when it comes to, try to play a guitar.
Yep.
There's just, maybe, yeah, if I were to put an absurd amount of time and effort and energy into, being able to do that thing, I probably could. But man, I've seen people, who don't, they haven't played an instrument, and they pick it up, and they don't put an absurd amount of time in it. They just, and they just go. They just go. And then you're just kind of like, yeah, what in the world? Yeah. And that, I think those are some of the things that, yeah, you can push through some of those, but there are limiting factors. Yeah. When we look at athletes on teams,
sure,
there are guys who work just as hard as the guy beside them, but they'll never have the arm cannon, yeah, to play third base. Yeah. They're probably going to be a second baseman, right, because they just don't have it. Right. Well, they've put in all the effort and all the work, yeah, but they can't. It's not the way they were made. And there are some of those things that I think are part of this conversation that I think are important for us to be able to, step back a little bit and go, well, I'm not getting that from this person. It's not happening. Well, why? Is it because they are being, the enemy to you and they're intentionally, it could be. We don't want to set that aside.
Sure.
That there could be some animosity or some brokenness, some bitterness that's causing a wall in communication. But if the person that you're with is trying and they're putting forth effort and you're like, oh, they're just not getting it. Well, maybe your expectation isn't quite in line with where they're at. Right. And it doesn't mean that they're less. It just means that what you're trying to derive from that person isn't formed yet. It hasn't been developed yet. Yeah. And it's going to take time if it comes. Right. And sometimes I think we just look at the person that we're with and we're going, nope. No, that's why, for better or for worse. That's why we signed up the way we signed up, is because all of us have limiting factors. And I think in conversations, man, there are moments in conversations that I'm having where it feels like I'm gone, but I'm fully capable of arguing in ways that I just wouldn't be capable of. We're going at it because now I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And there's other moments in conversations where I feel like I need to just sit back and, man, I really need to listen because I don't know if I am hearing. And that's the odd part. There's times where you're just like, I need to really listen. Well, then the person wants interaction and you're just really contemplating, and then you're self-reflecting as you're listening to the person that you're with. And then that person's telling you things about you, and you're actually going to those moments to try to understand what they're feeling and seeing, and but you're not actually connecting back with them because you're in a different place in your brain. And right. All sorts of those factors, I think, are, we need to be able to look at when we want to have those moments. But you were saying, so what do you do when someone does not have capacity, or it feels like, there are days where I go home and Juanita already knows that I'm done. I'm mentally done. I'm tapped out. I'm fully capable of emptying the dishwasher, doing the laundry, vacuuming the floors. I'm fully capable of taking out the garbage, and I'm fully capable of that. But I'm about good for about 3-4 minutes of conversation because my brain's tapped out.
Okay, so walk me through that. How do we get there, and how do we not end up coming home from work every day being like that?
Well, I don't.
Just for you personally.
For me personally, I don't think it's an everyday experience. But I think there seems to be collisions of time where a conversation wants to be had. And it seems like on the days where my capacity is tapped out, that I'm not fully capable of giving the complete attention and focus necessary to really take in everything.
So you're aware of this?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely aware of it.
So how do you navigate that?
I say, can we have this conversation in the morning? Can we have this conversation, tomorrow? Can we come back to this? Can we come back around? What's the important thing that I need to know? And can you say that to me again? Can you repeat that? Some of it is distraction based. I think some of it is, devices have limited our capacity to be focused. I think some of it is the way I'm wired. I think some of it is I think, understanding that the conversation that is wanting to be had is as important to me as it is to the person wanting to have it. Mm-hmm. So being able to set aside myself. Yep.
Meet them at their level.
Right. Meet them where they're at. Right. With also being willing to but be willing to say, listen, I've got 10, 15, and I'm done. Can we fit that in? And some of that's developing capacity. I think some of it's just being honest. I'm really gassed. I've had a lot of conversations. There's been some weighty things that have gone on today. I need to sit and think it through. I need to process, because I haven't had a chance to process everything. Right. And now I'm being asked to have more things to process. And my computer can't keep up. Right. That's what it feels like. So I think some of it is, I think some of the preventative stuff is being honest with the person that's wanting to have a conversation with you. And I think if it becomes something that's continual, to be a little bit more aware of saving capacity for conversations that need to be had, or engaging in conversations in the moments throughout the day where you have capacity that's still there.
Yeah. Because I think, and part of what I was trying to get at with some of this line of questioning is, I like I have a memory of me being at home when I was trying to fix our dishwasher, and y'all know how handy I am. So we all knew this wasn't going to end well. But it had happened. I don't remember all the details. For some reason, it happened when other people were coming over, and I think we had people drop by, and I'm on the floor there, and I'm trying to fix this, and I lost it. Like, I'm snapping at everyone. I was not a nice person. But I feel like often, like, you do this stuff and you go, okay, so I'm going to learn a technique to communicate with my wife, and I'm going to learn a technique to communicate with my kids, and I'm going to learn a skill set of, do they want to be hugged, helped, or heard? But then we show up and our mental shelf is so full that it's one little trigger away from completely collapsing. And then we get to the end of the conversation, we're like, how did this end up in a screaming match? I used the right techniques, I felt like. I've learned some things, and I think you show up to this and we're so unaware of how overly exhausted we are, how overly stressed we are. And I think for me, it's also like, man, my mind plays tricks on me. So if I'm grumpy at home already and then one of the kids walks by, so like one of the things what happened to me at this age is, one of the kids will walk by while I'm doing something and they're not working. Then I'll be like, freaking entitled kids. Like, you know what I mean? I don't tell them to do anything. They're not doing anything wrong. I'm bitter that I have to be working and they're wandering around living their dream. And then that little thought goes in your head of, these kids don't realize how valuable I am. They don't see my worth. They don't this. And now all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, we're in a conversation and I go at it. And the kid is just like, what the heck just happened? And so I think, okay, so you're going to go into these conversations and they're so loaded. Like, you talk about some of this stuff, like, again, I mean, whatever conversation you want to choose. I mean, the hot button issues right now are sexuality and gender and abortion and politics and those things. Man, it is a personal thing. So then you take something that already has an emotional charge. That takes a pretty big shelf life. So once it's on your shelf and then you put it with all the other stresses you had, you're overwhelmed because of your debt load, you're overwhelmed because of this, and then you get to the conversation and then it's just yelling. You're just blowing off steam. We're not even, like, you're in no place where you're able to have a conversation. Like, I would argue that it's almost as valuable as being drunk and trying to talk to somebody. Your mind just isn't there. Like, you don't have the space. So everything we talked about Sunday, you don't have the space for that. You may know the head knowledge. You may know you should. But if you're not in a good place, you can't. So then that, begs the question for me, like, I mean, there's so many different things, but the one is, I keep going back to the fruit of the Spirit and just the strangeness of that. Like, when you think about the power of God within you and self-control being one of the key ones, but then you look at, something like gentleness and you look at all these other little pieces there and you go, man, like, when you think about what a godly person would be, I feel like there's a lot of that in those moments. Man, if we could just have a little more self-control, I wouldn't destroy my marriage right now. If I would have a little more self-control, I would not say something to my kid that I'm going to so deeply regret later on. But we don't view those necessarily as the end goals, and we don't you don't train those muscles. And then the way this works, so you go to work, most of us, how do you start your day? On your phone, and you're on social media, which we already know what that does to its brain. And I've never looked into The Anxious Generation, written by, look it up. I can't remember the guy's name. There's so much research on the damage of social media to our anxiety and all that stuff. But anyways, so we start there. We spend our day at work.
It's interesting.
You have stress, but again, and it's not just online, but your normal stuff. You come home. Most of us, if you're in the stage of life that I'm in, you're chasing kids, you're doing this, you're doing that. 8 p.m. when the kids go to bed, now all of a sudden you want to have a conversation. There's nothing left. And so I think we need to find a way, again, the creating space piece, to actually have the capacity to have these conversations. But I think it's a lot of different things. Like, man, why do we show up at 10 o'clock for a 10 o'clock service on Sunday morning? And I ask this in the context of this. Is that how we treat all of our relationships? Yeah, we do. Like, you don't, when I go to the doctor, one of the things that they do beforehand is that they'll check my chart and they'll review a bunch of things and they'll prepare before they walk in, if they're a good doctor. But when we go into these things, we're just bouncing from one thing to another, to another, to another.
And we've not allowed the time in between to have consideration towards what we're about to engage in. Yeah.
So then when I look at the 3-part series and I go, okay, well, how am I viewing Patrick in this argument? So I'm going to go in, for me, let's say it's at work. I have to meet with somebody and they don't like one of the series I've done or something. If I don't take any time, how am I viewing this person? Well, if they're here to complain, I already know in my brain that I probably have to make sure that my head's in a good spot.
Right.
I wanted them to complain. I keep telling people, I want you guys to give us, things that we can do better. And then secondly, going, okay, well, what's my win out of this conversation? Because I can very quickly just go, well, my life is really hard. I can't imagine, you can't even believe how hard it is to write these sermons. And then you go, okay, so what are we trying, at the end of the day, what did we accomplish? But if you don't give yourself that time in that space, and so then, so I don't know, my brain's just racing on a lot of this. And when I do these series, like trying to find a way to say things that haven't been said before. Because a lot of the stuff that we should be doing, we're not doing. We just can't understand why we're not doing what we should be doing. And so then you just get used to not doing what you should be doing.
So what part of, your example, entitled kids, okay, and then you want to have a conversation because it's bugging you.
Sure it is.
Right? Like I'm working, I'm going, and like they're not. They're grabbing a snack and heading to
and a school snack. Like have something freaking healthy for once. You know what I mean? Like come on,
eat good. Like I need you to be healthy. So, like in my brain, I think about some of the harder conversations where we're like, we want to talk about things that bug us. Like I think of my kids. Leave your kids alone. I think sometimes I think to myself, like, you're going to ask for what? Like, you want me to do what for you? Can you give me a snack? No, like when you were 3, I brought you a snack. Like I don't need to now. And I wonder if some of the harder conversations that we want to have with the people around us are an outward manifestation of something that we haven't had a conversation with ourselves about.
What do you mean?
Well, what I mean by that is my kids are entitled because of me and how I've made decisions to parent them and what I've done in their life to, influence them and how I've treated certain things and how I've set certain expectations and how I haven't set certain expectations and how and the thing that I'm bothered with is actually a thing that I've created. So when I want to say a hard conversation with them, I feel like in some ways I'm placing onto them what I have now seen that I failed to do. Right. And I'm asking for them to be a better result of what my expectation was. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I would worry just a little bit. And I know what you're saying because I was thinking sort of the same thing, that what thinking my kid is entitled triggers is that I failed as a dad.
Right.
Right. But I think the other thing that it triggers is that our generation actually thinks that if we parent well enough,
our kids will turn out perfect.
100%. Right? No, like honestly, because some of the stuff within my kids, I look at it and I go, yeah, that's the brokenness coming out. That isn't a failure on me. I did nothing wrong there. There's nothing I could have done to make my kid perfect. And the reason I know that is there's nothing mom and dad could have done in my life to make me more perfect.
Right.
And we see that. And so I think there's a mixture of, I think it triggers us being failures as parents, but I also think there's an overwhelm that kicks in because you're afraid for your kids.
Yeah.
Right? If my kid stays entitled, what does that look like for their future? And then the overwhelm just kicks in from the sense of, I know I can blame myself, but I actually have no clue how I would do it different.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because all you've done is the best you can. So now you look and you go, and that's why it's always so interesting. You get the same 2 parents parenting 4 kids and they turn out all different. And you're like, so mom and dad are going to take the ownership of all that? I mean, sometimes there's instances, there's abuses, there's all sorts of stuff. But overall, when you come from a good family, that the free choice piece of it. But I think in a lot of these conversations, this also does play in. That we actually think we're that good, that we can control the outcome, and we get a lot of our worth And we see this a lot in social work. Like, this is one of the things that all of us that work at Family Central battle with, is not getting our worth from seeing the results in people's lives. So when they don't choose what we think they should choose, we feel like failures.
Right.
But I can't choose that. Like, I loved what we learned a while ago. You can provide opportunity, you can't provide motivation. So I can provide the opportunity for someone to better their life, to get an education, to all those things. I cannot in any way, shape, or form provide motivation.
Right.
When your child is very young, you can provide motivation through grounding or through whatever punishment or rewards. But at some point, if you don't have the motivation to do it, there's nothing I can do. I can try to inspire you. But in the end, it's totally up to you. But you derive so much of your identity on this. And so then you come into these conversations, and so much of it is like you said, I'm talking to my kid about being entitled, and he may be entitled, but who I'm really talking to is me. How the heck did you let this, like, why are you down here working while he's sitting up there playing? You didn't tell him to work. Why didn't you tell him to work? Why do you suck as a dad? And that begins to play in your head. And the more that plays, the more anger comes out.
Well, that, and your side, I think, is completely valid as well, that you could like have nailed that instructional part of it, and yet you still are not getting the result from the child because they have to choose to engage in the instruction.
How many times did we coach somebody?
But then we also feel the weight of that, because then I'm looking at, I'm wondering if the other people out there understand just how much time and effort and energy and prayers and sacrifice and commitment and crying and yelling and whatever it was to try to alter a behavior. Right. And I've tried to reinforce it in every way you can think of, and yet it's still there. Yeah. So then how do I'm going to have to stare at the people around me knowing that they're looking at me going, well, if you just would have done that better.
Yeah. Oh man, kids are the worst.
Oh man.
Because I remember when we had toddlers and you'd be in the grocery store and they'd start screaming, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this isn't about parenting. This is about me being embarrassed.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the child. This is me. Everybody around me thinks I'm a crappy parent.
Grapes. It's the secret. Go get grapes first.
Just to make sure they don't choke. Cut them in half.
And then just tell the cashier to put her finger on there a little bit to weigh them down a little bit more, because there's probably about 15, 20 that are missing.
But again, a lot of it goes back to our own triggers. Right.
Yeah.
And so this is the dilemma when we're trying to have these tough conversations, is that you're the problem with this conversation.
Right.
Because you're going to get into it. And like, I just think it's such a prime thing with Jose and I. She'll say something and I'll be like, you think I'm dumb? I'm like, no, she doesn't think I'm dumb. Why do you keep saying that? But it starts playing in my head. And then all of a sudden, the kids will say something, and then I'll get triggered. And my kid is like, well, you're always bugging me. How come I can't bug you?
Right. And they only meant it to like kind of give you a little diss because they're trying to play and have fun.
Yeah.
And then we take it personal, and it's like, what just happened there?
No, this just happened the other day in the office with Trevor. Well, it was funny because it was I wanted him to help me with something, and he didn't give me the response I wanted. And then it triggered me because I was like, I shouldn't even be doing this darn task, and I want a little bit of help. And I could catch myself as I was saying it. I was like, oh, for 5'6", Loid, grow up. Right? But again, I think that's an undervalued thing that people think, especially when this is your job, that you can hide that part of you.
Do you think it helps to, like, as you're engaging in the conversation, you actually say, hey, look, I know I'm extremely triggered by stuff like this. This feeling right here, I know I am, and I'm not trying to justify any sort of my responses right now, but I can get triggered by this. So as we walk into this conversation, I can get triggered. But like, kind of like being a little bit more honest about some of our, like, I know it's not an end,
well,
but like,
I think so. There's two parts, and I know you're not saying this, but I want to say this. Christians have gotten too used to going, well, that's just who I am.
Right.
Right. That's the broken part of me. So I think that part, I know you're not saying that, but I want to, like, just because that's always who you've been, work on it.
Right.
Right. Like, so I think that's important. But I think the other part of it is that it's a muscle to be developed.
Right.
So I do think the fakeness by which we do this, and that's why, like, it's really interesting as you're doing these studies, all this DEI and all that training, it has no effect, like minimal effect, because it's not actually changing people. It's just providing information.
Right.
You can role play, you can do all this jazz, but statistically, it's not making much of a difference because you're not actually changing the person. Like that takes time. You can't just like, okay, well, I want to identify a stereotype for you and now we've broken it. No, that's not the way that works.
In many cases, you reinforce it when you identify it.
100%. So there's a lot of that. But so then when we're doing this, I think a lot of it, again, goes back to a couple places. The one is you have to have people around you that can identify that for you. So when I look at the three of us, or let's back out. I had a conversation once with Abe Berg. So Abe's been a long time good friend of mine. And so we were driving back from Leamington, one of these meetings. And I don't remember how I worded the question, but it was something like, okay, you've known me pretty well. You know, what part of my life do you think I don't do well in ministry? And he thought a while and he said something to the effect of, I love that you're a visionary. I just think sometimes you come up with too many dreams and don't do anything with them. And I was like, oh, snap. But I didn't see that. To me, I was just like, I'm trying to inspire other people. And so if an idea doesn't come true, I'm okay with it. But from his perspective, the way I was living was like, you're just a bit wishy-washy in the sense of like, cool dream, not going to do anything with it. And so I think you have to have those people around you to make you more aware of who you are. And that's the only way to grow. I think Rick Warren asked a great question. He says, ask people what it's like on the other side of you. What is it like for you to be with me? And I think if you can get people to be honest with you, it's really, really valuable. Because a lot of times what happens is a lot of these problems, they've been going on for 20, 30 years before it ends up being a big issue. Right? Because nobody ever said anything. Yeah, they were all annoyed by that. Yeah, they didn't like this. And so I think that's a big part of it, so that when you get to these, I don't think you can get to one of these crazy, really difficult conversations and suddenly become somebody else. All it does, like when you become really animated or really angry or in a really stressful moment, it's just a true you that comes out.
Right.
It's not a different version of you. It's just all your filters kind of go down, all your, political correctness, all that goes away, and then you just go at it. That's not another person. That's the fully revealed you.
Right.
And I think that's the problem when we try to live this fake thing. We're like, okay, well, now I'm a business person, but at home I live this way. No, those are going to intersect. Your true character will show up when you become pressed. And so then people are like, well, how do we have these conversations? And I go, well, you're going to need to build character. So if you don't have self-control on the road, when somebody, cuts you off and you immediately get pissed, well, then why would you expect to have self-control somewhere else? Like that's the training ground for it, right? If you do the little things well. And so I think that a lot of what we're trying to accomplish and why church matters so much is that it is a constant training ground. And so there's a discipline. I'm going to show up, not every week. People need to go away, but I'm going to show up regularly. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to show up and make sure I'm dedicated. I'm going to show up and I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to try. Those are all skill sets that train your brain in a certain way, right? There's so much to it. But I think that's part of the problem now. We've gotten to a culture where we're not dedicated to work. We're not dedicated to family. We're not dedicated to a church. We're not dedicated to anything. We hold loose. So there's no like long-term character development. As soon as it gets hard, we go somewhere else. But that's where you're going to learn. Like that's where you learn that life lesson. So that the next time it gets hard, you're better set. So I think that better friendships and better honest conversations like that. And these are hard. It's not easy. Like I don't like when Joe calls me out on stuff. I don't like when my kids call me out on stuff. I struggle to call other people out on stuff. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you ever want to become somebody who does something, and is responds in a way that's incredibly incredible in one of these moments, you have to have training for it. People look at these moments where people forgive when they should never have forgiven. That's not likely their first time forgiving.
Right.
That was a training. That was the way you chose to live.
To forgive, yeah.
Right. So
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Then the other thing I want to talk about, we got a couple minutes left. When you're in a relationship where one person does all the talking and you feel like they never care about what you're saying, how do you know when to speak? Like, how do we determine? So that'd be the one example. The other one you could go with is like when you see somebody. No, let's stick to that one. Because I think I certainly have people like that in my life that when we hang out, I'm kind of like, well, I won't be necessary for the conversation. How do you navigate that?
To feeling like you are necessary for the conversation?
No, it's just not fun. Like if this podcast was me talking for an hour and you just stared at me, at some point people are like, I don't know why Patrick's there.
Yeah, why is he there? He could just sit over by Trevor. That would be perfectly fine. How to know that you're supposed to be engaging in the conversation? Is that like...
Okay, so let's play it a little bit further.
How do you think you're important enough? I think you have to continue, like, if the conversational aspect with the person that you're with is not to your liking, I don't think the option is to stop, even though, why should I say anything? It's not going to be taken for... I think that's a reactionary response to a lack of forward progress that you've been hoping will happen for 10, 15 years. But maybe the goal of what you've been looking for hasn't been actually articulated. I'm looking for further conversation here on these subjects, and I'm hoping that you will engage with them because I need it. Something that's like clear. Like I need, honey, can we set aside 10 minutes later to talk about this? And I'm going to need your 10 minutes of time to engage. Something that's like a defined parameter to help that person to understand that they're going to be committed to the conversation, and then they know there's a time limit so that they're going to be able to stop. So it's not going to be like endless. But I think, just getting to the point where we write off the person that we're with because it's not what we want. Well,
and don't think just marriage. This isn't a marriage question. This is more just a friendship, relationship type of thing. Because obviously marriage, the answer is very different. But
yeah, I think it depends on what you think that friendship is supposed to be. Like, is it supposed to be more than just a casual friendship? Like, is it supposed to be like one of your closer inner circle type friendships? And if that's the case, then have the two people sat down and actually like said, hey, I need more from you. And this is what my expectation is. Like, I don't know. I think some of that would go a long way. I think, if you're in a friendship where you're not being valued, and those conversations aren't going that way, well, maybe the person is not the kind of friend for that specific thing that you're looking for. Right. Like, I think that's true too. Like,
that's really interesting, especially because I haven't given you any context. And so it's interesting listening. Because I think part of what I see in Christian community that is part of the downfall in this is that we seem too nice. So we can have people in our life who we put up with abuse and we put up with, terrible behavior, and we put up with, well, every time I go out with this person, it is literally going to be just an hour of hearing gossip, an hour of this, an hour of that. And somehow it seems like our Christian duty to just stay. Right? And so you hear, I've lived this and hear it, but I also think, as I've gotten older, I've been more careful in who I allow into my hours. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's one of those things when it comes to this, that if, I think you have to identify clearly, there are people that I meet with that the whole goal of me meeting with them is for them to air out their life.
Right.
That's why I'm there. Not just at work, but I already know, like, that's my role, and we've both established that. But then I think there are other ones, and I think especially in my older age, I think the gossip is what makes me angry. Like when I go out with somebody and they just want to talk about, this and that, and whether it's a pastor, whether it's somebody else, I'm like, I just have no capacity for this. Mm-hmm. And I think there is some boundaries that is missing within, maybe it's Mennonite, maybe it's Christian. I have a hard time labeling it. I just know with people who are of our mindset, I think sometimes we get meekness and we get the softness, and then we just put up with stuff. But then on the flip side, we don't actually stand up either. We don't go, hey, look, like that's not okay. Like this conversation's not okay. And so you just kind of have that thought in your head of, well, I don't like this conversation. And so you just keep going back to it. But
do you think the ground of, gossip or whatever, like when you get into moments where all you're doing is sitting around talking about other people who aren't there, like, is that just because we're bored and haven't come up with any new ideas or purposes that God has set us toward. So now we're just going to sit around and talk about the things that are around us because we've got nothing higher to talk about. Do you know what I mean? Like, what is it that, like,
why is it so appealing?
Yeah, like why is it like the human go-to?
Yeah.
Like, is it always like the comparative? You're always trying to like one up the person you're talking about. Oh, I can't believe so and so's like that, or what is it like? What is the where you're so bored, like there's nothing interesting to talk about? Like,
I do think you're onto something with some of it. I don't think it's that simplified. I think it can also become a habit.
I think so.
Like when I think of the things I would gossip about, I would gossip about things that seemed so unnormal in my brain that I'm not sure how to process this.
Right.
So I would go, did you hear so-and-so broke up? What in the world? And so there's a part of it that is like, I don't know why you find joy in sharing things. I have no idea. I don't even know why I find joy in it. I also don't know why you drive by accident scenes and you want to look. I have no clue. There's a lot of those things. But I do think there's some of the, you don't quite know what to do with it. But I think some of it is also just sheerly a really gross behavior that we just kind of get used to. And I think, I do think when, in Elmer, the joke always was, go to Tim Hortons and you'll hear all the gossip. And I don't know if that's still a true thing. But I think sometimes when you hang around and you have no purpose and there's nothing to say, I do think that some of the boredom, and I've done nothing with my life. This last week, I did nothing worth talking about.
Right.
So let's talk about Bill, who really screwed up his life. That should be entertaining. So I think there's a part of it. I do think that. But yeah, I think overall, one of the things that I think both of us have started to do better maybe in the last 5 years, I think trying to be just more brutally honest with stuff up front.
Mm-hmm.
In conversations. I know in the office we certainly have, and just trying to look, love you, think it's really good. That was way too long, or that was way too off, or this didn't go well. Now let's move on with life. But I think a lot of our relationships aren't set up that way. We didn't want that. And so then if your relationships aren't set up that way, it takes work. But I think it's worth it. I think, if you have that friendship that isn't working and you're frustrated, have a conversation. Hey, look, I'm struggling with this. I don't enjoy when we get together and we always gossip. Can that end?
So if the scriptures say, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the complexities that we feel in conversations, are they just the revelations of the complexities of the heart?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot to that. Like, I think what comes out of your mouth is very, very much evident of what's gone in and what's actually being processed in there and how your heart is navigating and moving. Like, I think there's a lot to it. I think though, like, again, and we could go on tangents and we should shut her down, but
yes,
I think we also live in a world where we just do not give enough importance to the fact that most of our communication we have learned to do with the phone. We do not know how to deal with the human element of it. And I think there's value to it. There are times where Josie and I have finished a fight over the phone because, you go to work or whatever, and you just 2 hours later, you're finally calm enough and you shoot off a text and say, sorry, I love you, type of thing. But I think there's a lot there. I think the ability to travel and not have to see people again, I think there's a lot there. I think to live the way Jesus calls us to live in conversation is something that you have to really battle for. It will never be natural. I think it will be something that you inevitably have to fight for. And I think that's why it's a fruit of the Spirit. It's like, if you're pursuing after Jesus, if your goal is to be like Jesus and to follow him and to pursue after him, you will be forced to be gentle with people. You will be forced to exude self-control. You will be forced to do this stuff. And so I think that's where you begin. I think for Christians, sometimes, we just think it should be easier. And you put this on other people. Well, you're a Christian. You should be better. Yeah, well, I'm still broken. So are you. Where's the self-control? Where's the grace? Where's all that? I just think it's worth it. I think it's worth the conversation to try to go, is there a better way to talk about abortion that isn't a theory, that actually helps, young couples and young people make better decisions, that they're not faced to have to make a decision about whether I'm going to have an abortion or not. Is there a better way to talk about sexuality and gender? Is there a better way to talk about politics where we can actually go, are there conversations in Elmer and Malahide that we need to have because our councils are making some decisions that may not be wise? Can we do that without it being just let's call the mayor ridiculous for whatever decision? And so I think it's worth fighting for. I think as a church, it's worth trying to figure out how to do this. But to think that it's going to be a theory, that there's no way. It's not a theory. It's 100% your pursuit after Jesus, and then allowing him to determine some of the stuff and going, okay, if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus, I have to be this type of friend. And then we go from there. But he sets the standard. Not the elders, not Pastor Albert, not anybody else. It's Jesus, it's scripture. And so then we go from there. Okay, that's how I want to live. And then how do we get there? And then the conversations become really cool and difficult and meaningful. And then we kind of see where God lets it go. But
so looking unto Jesus.
100%. All of this is that. If he's not where you're looking, none of this works. Like I'm telling you, like it's too complicated, it's too difficult. It's not going to seem like it's worth the fight if you're not looking to Jesus. All right. Love you guys. Talk soon.